welcome to our board meeting. We'll now call the meeting to order. Valerie, please call the roll.
Mr. Breaker.
Here.
Dr. Cross.
Present.
Dr. Crawl.
Present.
Mrs. Lehman.
Here.
Mr. Neely.
Here.
Mr. Roth. And Mr. Rudd.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is now time for audience presentations. This is the only time set aside for audience presentations. The Board of Education will take all presentations under consideration and respond at the latest by the end of the next regular Board of Education meeting. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Participants are expected to conduct themselves with civility and respect and follow the guidelines outlined in Board Policy 830. We will be maintaining that it will be 5 minutes, a hard 5 minutes. So, Dr. Sander, I think you've got some cards, so if you want to start calling names.
I do, Mr. Breaker. Tammy Woodmansey is up first and followed by Nathan Fay.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm Tamara Woodmansey, and I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Brian Groth, who is not here tonight. We are both Morton residents. So we've seen a sampling of hate and extremist organizations that Mr. Saunders subscribes to through his work email that arrive every day in his inbox. Superintendent Smock wasted no time in telling Grundy parents that it's okay to use school resources for personal matters as long as it's done after hours. Well, let's talk about something that happened during work hours then. A student at Grundy entered Principal Michael Saunders' office during work hours in the 22-23 school year. The student noted that Mr. Saunders had firearms displayed on his computer screen with the title, Modern Cowboy Loadout. A formal complaint was filed with the district, and the investigation confirmed what the student saw and indicated the content was likely from the website classicfirearms.com, which Mr. Saunders also subscribes to. Nevertheless, the superintendent contended that there was no violation of the student's rights or board policies because it did not occur in an instructional setting, but rather in Mr. Saunders' office. So apparently in District 709, it's okay for a staff member to use school resources during work hours to look at firearms on their computer screen and expose a young child to it. I can't imagine anyone that would tolerate such behavior from a school employee. Apparently, when that school employee is a close personal friend of the superintendent, it's not a big deal, but it is really a big deal, a very big deal. This is an elementary school, for heaven's sake. Put yourself in the shoes of a child or subordinate that is exposed to weapons by the person who has charge over them. How would this register with you? For someone who has experienced gun violence, it would be traumatic. For someone who has been assaulted by the principal, they may wonder what comes next. For someone who wanted to voice a grievance, they may think it's dangerous to do so. For someone afraid of the principal, it only intensifies that fear. For someone looking for an excuse to waste limited resources and intimidate and bully others, they have found someone in leadership to be their role model. This story and others like it will resonate beyond these walls if you don't take swift action. I restate my request for the removal of Principal Michael Saunders, Superintendent Craig Smock, and the resignation of board member Diane Crawl. And on my own behalf, Superintendent Craig Smock had family members in the audience laughing at the board meeting where youth were traumatized in September, which he has failed to explain, much less apologize for. Mr. Smock's emails have been FOIA'd, and requests for these public records have been met with resistance. Is it likely that Mr. Smock has bigoted anti-LGBTQ+ subscriptions as well? We'll find out soon. Mr. Smock has a documented history of failing to address bullying and rights violations and opens this district up to potential lawsuit. There is no place for bigotry within public schools where kids need to feel safe, equal, and protected, where all kids deserve the same level playing field and no bias. Mr. Smock needs to resign. At the last school board meeting, a Christian pastor was invited in to lead us all in a Christian prayer. This is a violation of the Establishment Clause, and every school board member there violated the constitutional requirement of religious neutrality in public schools. As board members, you rejected investigation and dialogue about member Dr. Krall's promoting of her religion, instead offering support to her. What about those whose rights were violated? You are not running a church. End the abusive, coercive religious indoctrination in Morton Public Schools. Follow the law. Allow the comprehensive human sexuality curriculum to be taught. Those that don't want their kids in it, keep them out of it. Parent your own children.
20 seconds.
Not other people's children. Again, I restate my request for the removal of Principal Michael Saunders, Superintendent Craig Smock, and the resignation of Board Member Diane Krall.
Okay, Nathan is up and will be followed by Megan Bohm.
Good evening. Tonight I'd like to start out by stating first of all to the members of our community and schools who are LGBT, I want you to know that we see you, we care for you, we love you, and you're welcome here in our schools and in our community. A community is not defined by a group of people who all agree with each other. Community is a group of individuals who can care for each other and work together in spite of their differences and disagreements. The problem with the leftism synonymizing disagreement with hate is that there is no way for a community to truly thrive if you hate everyone that you disagree with. As a Christian, there are many beliefs that I don't agree with, yet I still love the person who holds them. There are even others in the Christian community who I disagree with, and I love and care for them. So if you're LGBT and you're hearing this, my struggle isn't with you. I'm here to expose the leftist agenda that these activists are actually here to promote. If you're listening carefully, they've already said the quiet part out loud. Ms. McMeekin and just this last speaker stated the last time that they are looking to add comprehensive, developmentally appropriate human anatomy, biology, and sexual curriculum to the school. She's referring to what's better known as CSE, or Comprehensive Sexual Education. This is the sex education curriculum that is designed by none other than Planned Parenthood. So you know it's gonna be good. This curriculum, among a host of other issues, actively promotes sexual exploration and other at-risk behaviors to children. This curriculum, not LGBT individuals, is unwelcome in our school system. Also, last meeting, a few quotes were cited from a website called Freedom from Religion. Here in the United States, we have the freedom of religion, not the freedom from religion. The First Amendment was written to protect individuals from being persecuted by the government for their religion or personal beliefs. It was not written to keep you from being offended by anyone who dares to hold different beliefs than you. We have seen in the past where the freedom from religion leads in other places and times like Cambodia or the Soviet Union. The freedom from any belief or person group always leads to dark places. Saul Alinsky is a prominent leftist activist from the 70s who wrote the Bible for leftist activism called The Rules for Radicals. In it, one of the rules reads, accuse your opponent of what you are doing to create confusion and to inoculate voters against evidence of your own guilt. This is the tactic that they are using. Ms. McMeekin could probably tell you this since she is a full-time paid activist for the left. She seems to have been ever since she was let go from Western Illinois University for using her school email to promote and to send out emails for her causes. I'm guessing this is where she got the idea for her FOIA request. We also heard a gentleman on September 5th accuse, unfounded and untrue, mind you, of Mr. Saunders of assault. Yet later that same meeting, the gentleman stood up and put his hands on another speaker that he disagreed with, which is actually legally assault and battery. They accuse us of hate, they curse us, they make fun of us and call us idiots and bigots because of our beliefs. If you want to stop bullying, you might start by taking an inward look at your own movement. The sentiment expressed last meeting, you wouldn't want your precious school district to be sued if you don't fire these people and adopt our agenda, sounds an awful lot like you wouldn't want your precious business to burn if you don't buy our fire insurance. These are no more than 2-bit mafia tactics that are repurposed for our modern lawfare and cancel culture. They keep pointing to instances of bullying and blaming them somehow on a principal because of his Christian beliefs, or on a board member because she believes in the power of prayer. Both of whom I know personally would go to the mattresses for any child they knew that was being bullied, regardless of their beliefs or sexual orientation. We live in a fallen world, and if you are looking for a community or a school completely devoid of bullying, you are looking for a utopia. Morton overall is a kind and caring community. Bullying does not define Morton, no more than violence, murder, drugs define Ms. McMeekin's community of Peoria. Ms. McMeekin rails against our school board for allowing a great principal who also happens to be a Christian to keep his job. Meanwhile, in her own community, there were children murdered by gang violence less than a month ago.
20 seconds.
And there are so many other students who experience violence and insecurity on a daily basis in District 150. Yet our issues in Morton seem to be more pressing to her. That's because the issues in District 150 do not fit into her agenda. Because they have already adopted that agenda. When a speaker at last meeting said that you can find another school that fits your beliefs better, I don't believe he was saying that you should get out of ours. Rather, I believe he was pointing out that there are plenty of schools who choose to choose.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Megan Bohm is up and will be followed by Amy Peterson.
I'm not ready at this time, thank you.
Okay, Amy Peterson, and will be followed by Dr. Fisher.
Good evening. My name is Amy Peterson, and I live in Morton, and I have a junior at high school. And I just want to say that I have known Diane Call for the last 14 years, and I got to know her because our kids both attended the same schools. And so I've gotten to know who she is and what her character is. And I know that she is kind, she is gentle, she is soft-spoken, she is humble, she is generous with her time, she travels to foreign countries and provides medical care for people. It is just a blessing that she is a part of our board, and I'm so thankful for her service and her just giving of her time and energy to be a part of the board. So I'm thankful for her, and I wanted to share that with you. And I also would like to say that I have had a meeting with Dr. Smock that about an issue that one of my students had with medical challenges, and I found him to be very compassionate, an excellent listener. I could tell that he sincerely cared, and he also then helped advocate for my son. And so I thank you as well for being a wonderful, giving wonderful service for our district. And I'm just thankful for the whole school board. I think you all do an excellent job, and we really appreciate you.
Okay. Dr. Fisher is up.
Hello. So I want
wanted to start off by reminding everyone of a couple of things. That there is a difference between personally attacking someone and holding them publicly accountable for their words and actions. So no one's calling an idiot, no one's doing any of that. We're standing up here and saying, hey, this person did a bad thing and we all saw you do it and we think there should be consequences for that action. And you can be a good person and do bad things, and there should still be accountability for those actions. So I'm going to start tonight by holding some people accountable. Several of the board members seem to want to talk a good talk last board meeting, reassuring us they don't want children bullied, they want the neutrality policies currently in place enforced, and they just don't understand why are they bullying the black and gay kids. Baloney. Baloney to that. Unless there has been some serious transformation on your parts in the last couple of years, that's crap. The kids learned this behavior by watching adults like you. They learned it was acceptable to discriminate by watching you. Dr. Kroll, 7 years ago, you stood on the Bertha Auditorium stage and you spewed hateful, false information about LGBTQ youth. I was there. You painted them as confused and broken and undeserving of dignity and the right to use the bathroom that aligned with their gender. And yet after modeling this behavior, you're wondering and surprised why the youth are following your misguided lead. Tom Neely voted in favor at that meeting of humiliating and discriminating against transgender youth. Kim Johnson was a teacher in the Morton School District until she resigned in 2021. Many of you served on the board during her tenure, when there were student complaints of homophobia and racism dating to 2009. That's 12 years of complaints that were pushed under the rug. She literally told a room full of students, if you're gay, it's because you weren't wanted in your parents' womb. And not a single person on this board publicly called her out or condoned her for that. When previous board member Bart Rinkenberger made astonishingly transphobic public statements, not a peep from any one of you. Your silence and your inaction make you complicit. If anything, it makes you more guilty than the children doing the bullying, because at least they don't have fully developed frontal lobes yet. You, however, have been given ample opportunity to do the right thing, protect these vulnerable children, and stick up for their rights. But instead, time and again, you've continued to provide affirmation to the bullies by making it very public that you share their views, you support their actions. So if you're wondering where they learned this behavior and that this was appropriate, it's from watching authority figures like you. Nothing can make that more clear than your support, your blanket support of Principal Saunders. So for some reason, you still don't seem to understand why that's a problem. So I am going to ask you all to please use some active listening ears, you at home too, and do a thought experiment with me. Everyone in this room or everyone on this board is pretty openly Christian, right? Christians at home, please join me as well. In case you didn't know, the Taliban wants you dead. They want you like super dead. So if you can imagine being 8 or 10 years old and walking into a school where 95% of your peers are members of the Taliban. The principal is a leader in the Taliban. He actually has a Quran on his wall in his office. And if that isn't making you uncomfortable enough to imagine going to school in that environment, you soon find out he has subscribed to tens of thousands of emails talking about how Christians are the devil, don't deserve to exist, and it's his religious duty to wipe them all out. Do you feel safe? I want you to really imagine that, being surrounded at school every day by people who publicly hate a part of your core being, something you have all said is part of your core being. Even if the whole school board, who, by the way, in this scenario is full of his Taliban friends, reassure you he's a good guy and would never hold it against you that you are a Christian, how could you not still fear for your life every time you walk down to be alone in that principal's office? Because that's what the gay and black kids are currently experiencing every day at Grundy School. I want to loudly make this very clear. Principal Saunders is not owed employment. It is being principal is not his constitutional right. Black and LGBTQ children do have a constitutional right to safely attend public school, and it is impossible for them to do that when the person in charge of them publicly, actively hates who they are. If it hasn't been made obvious by now, no one sitting on this board or in this administration is qualified to objectively analyze the problems happening in our district, much less come up with an effective plan to address them. So the first thing I think you need to do is put down your own biases, hire a knowledgeable expert outside counsel to analyze the district and propose an action plan. The local ACLU chapter is happy to help you with this. Next, start doing your jobs and actually address these constituents that are coming in here week after week to bring their concerns. It's in your own bylaws to provide a public response by the next board meeting, and yet you have to do that even once. I proposed an amendment change 4 weeks ago, and there's been no response to that. I emailed each of you a copy of the Affirming Inclusive Schools Task Force report, which literally has a chapter for school boards on how to make more inclusive policies. I offered to sit down and discuss you with it, and not a single board member even gave me the courtesy of a response. So let's start by actually responding to those statements.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. All right. I think that is all of our speakers that I have.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to administrative reports.
Megan's ready to talk.
Megan
Yep,
has not spoken.
I was not ready when I was called.
She is ready now.
Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Megan Bond. Thank you very much for your time. In the words of Dr. Ashley Fisher, next, you should get an anonymous reporting system that's evaluated by a neutral third party. All that talk last time about how no one utilizes the bullying hotline, do any of you know where those hotline complaints go? If a student or family were to go to make a complaint right now about Principal Saunders discriminating against them, who do you think addresses that complaint? Ding, 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 Principal Saunders. I don't even know what to say if you can't see the problem in that system. There are now multiple available phone apps that allow students to not only immediately video record instances of bullying using their phones, but they can anonymously submit those recordings and complaints to a third party designated to investigate and make recommendations for interventions. Pick a reporting system that not only protects the students, but results in actual corrective action. Next, let's hire someone who doesn't subscribe to hate groups and let them be in charge of our young children. I can't believe that this one is even still up for debate, if I'm being honest. Then if you really, truly want to show that you care about the Black and LGBT community in this town, give up your board seat. Give up your board seat and assign a Black, gay, or trans community member to the board. It's in the bylaws that the board can assign whomever they like to an empty board seat, so give them a seat at the table and let their voices be heard. Lastly, each one of you have actively played a part in teaching the children of this district how to hate. So take ownership of that and teach them how to be understanding and supportive instead. Propose age-appropriate safe space training in each of the schools. Dr. Fisher will do it for free, and if you don't want her doing it, she has contacts certified who will do it for free. So there you go. You are now very publicly been given several tools to fix the problems that seem to be stumping you. So, Dr. Fisher wants to make it very clear that if you continue to follow the same path of inaction that you've chosen in the past, if you continue to remain complicit in the persecution of marginalized children through your silence, then the next Black, gay, or trans kid that tries to kill themselves, that's going to be on y'all.
All right. That concludes that.
Now we'll move on to administrative reports, starting with the superintendent report.
Okay, this past week, we've had a couple of safety drills, pretty extensive safety drills. We've had one at Levy Brown that involved a lockdown and an evacuation. And earlier today, we did the same at Morton Junior High. And Dr. Sander has a report. Just tell us a little bit about how it went.
Okay, it's been a very busy week, just practicing our response plan in the event that we have a situation that requires us to go into a lockdown. And so I typed up what we like to call as an after action report. After you do a drill like this, you go through and you identify the things that worked well, and then you identify the things that we need to improve upon. So I've got copies of that, and I believe they're out in the board folder for you to review. Both drills were absolutely fantastic. The Levy Brown drill, we did hard lockdown, evacuation, and we also we exercised a reunification. It was a small scale reunification, but it's a good practice to try to establish that muscle memory in the event that something like this would happen. And so, a couple of lessons learned. Both the admin teams, both at Levy Brown and at the junior high, did a commendable job prepping for this. I do have to give a shout out to Faith Waterfield and her team at Levy Brown. They were just spot on with everything that they did, from going into the hard lockdown to the release from the police, getting on the buses, and then going to the reunification location, and then actually we had 5 parents that participated in doing the reunification process. I believe that their entire exercise lasted about 1 hour. And that's from the time that the stopwatch starts, from when they get the all call. And so a lot of just great suggestions that came from that. The junior high, they did their exercise today. And I think they were about 1.5 hours total time. That's pretty amazing when you sit there and think that you've got 600 people that are going to be go into lockdown, be released 1 classroom at a time, get onto a bus. There were 10 buses lined up, transport them out to Grace Church, get them off the bus into Grace Church, all accounted for, and then turn around and then reverse it, get back to the school. And so that lasted about 1.5 hours. And so a couple of the big takeaways, I talked to Sergeant Smith with the police department, Officer Rowe. They both recommended that in the event of a real emergency, having a check-in spot for parents coming to do reunification at the beginning of the facility, not all the way up to the building, but like having a site, where you turn off the main road into the facility. What would that entail? We need to have like shelter, cover, if it's cold, possible heaters. And so that gets us thinking through who could we reach out to get, some sort of shelter facility so people could check in parents as they come on in. As Mr. Rudd knows, who's done a lot of these type of exercises in the military, communication is always key. And I will tell you, the communication worked really well. We tested a couple of things from the early notification coming to the district office, executing, going through, like making sure that all the other buildings knew that we were going into, that one building was in a lockdown, to simulating Dr. Smock sending out a swift reach message to everyone. It's just all of the little things that you need to do in a short period of time to keep the advantage on the things that we need to do to get kids safe with their families. And so it's been a busy week. I give kudos to both staff and our transportation. The churches that provided relocation sites, that's huge, because we got to be able to get 600, 700, 800 kids, maybe 1,000 people into a location. So we're building our resources. We're going to continue to test this. We'll pick 2 more schools next year and continue to just improve upon this process. So
I was told to pass on the message that one of the Levy Brown went to the hall that our church has, and the couple church members that were there could not have been more complimentary. Miss Waterfield and the admin team and the teachers, and especially the students, said it was amazing how they just sat in rows and they were reasonably quiet and everything else. So they were happy to participate and they were impressed. So I was instructed to pass along.
Well, thank you. And I want to emphasize that we're constantly looking for locations, because situations may dictate that, our original facility may not be available. And that's what exactly happened. And so we had to use the fellowship hall at the Apostolic Christian Church. And so we took something that was a problem, turned it into a great success. Now we've expanded our capabilities of where we could go and do that. And the staff there were just absolutely wonderful to work with us on short notice. And I would say it was a successful operation on that.
Okay. Well, kudos to Dr. Sander. If you can't tell, this is his area of passion, or one of his many areas of passion, and you did a great job organizing it and fulfilling it. So thank you for all your work as well.
Thank you.
A few updates for committee work. We had a finance committee meeting not too long ago to go through the levy that's going to be presented tonight. So thank you for that from the finance committee. Policy committee, we still haven't seen the latest press policy release yet. We're anxiously awaiting that. Is that fair to say?
I'm still waiting.
One thing I'd like to add to our docket is review of our public comments policy. I want to take a look at them see if there's any changes that we need to make or things that we need to say differently in our policy. So we are going to take a look at that as well. There's a lot of, I would say, mystery to that process and what we're allowed to say and do, what we're allowed to let be said. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to educate ourselves on that and look through our existing policy, make sure we're actually meeting that policy and seeing if there's anything we can add to it. So that'll be on our docket as well. Facilities Committee still needs to meet to go through the 2024 capital projects. So we'll need to get that going so that some of the projects are pretty major. They need time to go to bid and get good prices back and competitive bids. So really need to kind of get that going. I know one project that's not a mystery, and we saw it today. Some of you took a tour of Jefferson School and you saw half the wing, the completed flooring on all 3 floors. And next summer, our plan was, and we're going to continue with this plan, is to do the other half of the wing, and that's a full asbestos abatement. It's a major project, but you could see the outcome of half of it. Hopefully you got a chance to see that today. So we know that's on the docket, and we're definitely doing that, but there's some other projects that would add up to typically it's around $2 million that we budget each summer for that. So there's other projects to consider and to get those things rolling. So at some point in time, we'll get together, and I think it's you two gentlemen, and we'll make that meeting happen and present kind of what's on our mind for that. Okay. Negotiations Committee is another thing we still need. It's not as urgent. That's a springtime thing, but we'd like to get at least our team figured out and get some dates on the calendar so that our teachers can prepare for the negotiations process. And I think that concludes. I know you still got the extracurricular mission committee is still planning meetings, and maybe have no updates yet, but that's still something in the works.
We do have a meeting that we're trying to get scheduled for next week to bring the committee back together and look at some of the work that has been done, and hopefully that'll be the next step. We'll get a little bit closer to getting some finished products done. So.
Okay. This week is Parent-Teacher Conference Week for just the upper class, or the secondary, so 7 through 12. So we're doing it differently this year. We'll see how this goes. We have different dates for 7 through 12 as we do for elementary. Elementary is not till November 9th and 10th. So we're trying this out. That was something that's been discussed at length with our teachers. Elementary teachers prefer later conferences where they have more time to kind of experience the students and see what they're capable of and testing and different things. So just a reminder, we've got split conferences this year for the first time, and we're looking forward to seeing if that's a better way to do it. We think so. So that's Thursday and Friday for grades 7 through 12, November 9th and 10th for elementary school. Also, just want to remind everyone that this Saturday, it doesn't fall on a school day this year, but this Saturday is Veterans Day, and many of our schools will be doing various assemblies or celebrations or recognitions. There's all kinds of different levels of things that are happening, recognizing our veterans. You may know this already, that Patriot Day is a very big day in most of our elementary schools in particular, where we introduce veterans and first responders. And so we still do also for Veterans Day, recognize the veterans, and you'll see a lot of that on our marquees and different video recognitions and things that we do in our schools. And I just want to take some time out to thank our veterans in our community, all of those that have served, and just really appreciate the sacrifice involved with that. And I also want to thank those at the table. So we have Jerry Rudd and Tom Neely and Dr. Sander, all involved in the military, and we just want to thank you for your service. So thank you. Thank you. Today, I know a few of you were able to attend the 95th anniversary celebration of Jefferson School. Mrs. Wyman did a fabulous job organizing that. She had her plate full today of various things, also hosting the board meeting, which also went very well. Thank you. And just appreciate the Jefferson staff and Ms. Wyman and all the work that went into that presentation and also our board meeting dinner tonight. In that, I just want to just say a few things about it.
it kind of gave me an opportunity, I got to speak at that, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of recount what the last few boards have done with Jefferson School, going from a position of potentially retiring the building. There was talk about possibly retiring it, really not that many years ago, I would say 15 to 17 years ago, and how we've kind of turned that corner and decided to invest in the building and restore it instead of kind of put it to rest. So, and I think the community sees, I know you can see from the outside even, many of the things that we've done, from air conditioning it many years ago, which that was not the easiest building to air condition, but we did that pretty well for the most part. New windows and window lintels. I don't know if you recall not too many years ago what it looked like and what it looks like now. Interior door frames and secure entrances in an old building like that. We're always doing roofing work. We've done brick tuck pointing. There's a new bus lane it seems like it's been there forever, but it hasn't been there forever. It's a really nice bus lane in the back. Playgrounds. Of course, the PTO very involved in assisting with some of these upgrades, like the playground, the electronic sign, and even they've got other projects in mind along the way. Lockers. Talked about the updated flooring that we just did and the project yet to come on the other wing. Updated primary wing restrooms. Cafeteria was remodeled. There's outdoor seating. There's probably many things that I've left off the list. Millions of dollars I didn't add up, didn't do the total sum of all that, but certainly millions of dollars of work, and it just, I think we see the pride that's in that building, and I just wanted to take some time to talk about that on this 95th anniversary. So kudos to the board, this board, and even previous boards have made that decision, and I think it's really paying off. People love that school, no doubt about that. So just want to share that with you. We have future plans, again, the other wing of flooring and paint and trim and all of that, but also there's a plan for outdoor learning space to be created there. I think the PTO is going to help with that. And the gym floor, we were on the gym floor. I think that's the original gym floor from 1928. And we had issues with steam pipes leaking underneath it. There's some warping. You may have seen that when you walked on it. So at some point in time, we're going to get that on our docket as well and look and see what we can do with the gym floor. So anyway, kudos to Mrs. Wyman. Jeff RBC did the whole stage setup. We had live music, and just was a great day. So thank you. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. To the President's report, as Dr. Smock mentioned, we had the chance to have a board dinner at Jefferson School, so thanks, Mrs. Wyman. I still think your games are rigged, but that's me. I'm just a little bitter, but and I took a self-guided tour prior to the meeting. I just noticed, I told you, Mrs. Wyman, it's amazing how neat and tidy the hallways are, and they're free of clutter, and it's, for being the oldest school in the district, it does not show. So, and my sad reality is I realized when I did the math, is I started attending Jefferson grade school in the first half of the 95 years. Not too happy about that, but it is what it is. We had a couple board members go to the Central Illinois Valley IASB meeting. Jerry and Tom went last Wednesday, I believe, so I don't know if you two have anything to share on that, or any takeaways, or babysitting Craig the whole time, or whatever.
Well, my 2 cents are, it was a good meeting to go to. If you guys get a chance to go to the regional meetings, I would definitely go. I think there's like 3 around here. I try to make one of those 3. I always learn something new. This time I learned that there is a library at the IASB, so that was interesting to know. And anyway, they just give tidbits of information, and there's a couple breakout sessions that helps. I attended the negotiations one, and there was a new school board one. So it was very well put together, and Tom was a guest speaker, so we're big time because of Tom.
And coming to an end. But I did get a new responsibility, and I'm going to serve on a committee. It's the 2030 committee. There was the 2020 committee, and I think there's going to be about 13 school board members. Picture this, 40 superintendents. So it's going to be a big group, but we're going to look at student safety, student achievement, funding, some of the mandate issues. It was pointed out, and this one shocked me, if we were to comply with all of the state mandates on what we teach, it would take 15,000 hours of time on the part of, if I got that right?
Yeah, I think
That's right. And there's only 9,000 hours in the school year. So my math isn't very good, but I don't think that works out. That's why we're spending so much time talking about mandates in Springfield and Washington, and so, but I will be on that committee. There's 3 meetings, and we'll see where we go with those issues.
5,500 bills that were sent out to the legislator.
Yes, and then over 1,000 of those bills impact public education. And some of them are pretty silly. For instance, this one was brought up at one of the meetings that I was at, but a legislator, one of the leaders in the House, proposed a bill mandating toilet paper in all of the restrooms in the Chicago public schools because somebody called and complained. Instead of picking up a phone and calling a janitor or doing whatever, they write a bill. I mean, just giving you examples of some of the craziness that goes on. So I don't want to I'm probably taking too much time, but there's a lot of craziness.
Thank you for that. Just more information will be coming on the Illinois Associate School Board member, the meeting that's coming up in November, or less, probably a month away or something like that, pretty close, so. And then anything for agenda building this evening?
Agenda building, I want to make sure that everybody knows what it takes. So good job, Dr. Sander, what it takes to do these emergency response exercises. I was a big part of that too in the military. I have a lot of passion for that. But the biggest thing is, and this is why you got the right person for the right job there, is you have to make calm out of the chaos. And if you don't practice, and this is why we have to make sure that we practice, it gets very chaotic, and hopefully, Lord willing, that we never ever have to use it, but you have to practice it. So calm out of the chaos is really what those exercises are about. So that's why you're a good person for that job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure.
Anything else? That, we'll move on to discussion items.
Our first thing is the levy. So Ms. Kowalski, our CFO, will come forward and do a levy presentation. Seems like we just discussed the budget not too long ago. Now it's the levy season. Picture downtown Morton.
Okay, so as Dr. Smock just said, I feel like I do the budget and then I do the budget again so quickly, but obviously this one's a rough estimate, what we could be looking at for the next year. So the first thing I usually go over with you is just our timeline of what we're looking at. Today I'm presenting to you. November I'll be asking you to approve. And then in December, actually having the public hearing, and then the final levy approval in December. And then, of course, I have to turn it in the last Tuesday of December. This is the basic information I always provide every year and how it's always calculated. I have a big spreadsheet that I do everything in. I think a couple of you have sat down with me before and gotten a little bit detailed as far as the different equations and calculations that are done in order to come up with what we do. But essentially, it's last year's extension, CPI, new growth, and then we get this year's extension. So it's a pretty straightforward process, but a lot of calculation involved. So the highlights, what does this year or next year's levy look like, or this year's levy that's going to be collected in next fiscal year? The total increase in levy is a little over 2 million, and that's without the bond and interest levy factored in. Of that, the total increase in salaries is 1.2 million. Now that's an estimate, of course. I don't know exactly what that number is going to look like, but that's my ballpark. And again, with the insurance is my ballpark too. If you remember, we had 18% increase and then a 9% increase in the last couple of years. I'm putting 15 there. I don't know how close I am on that, but I'd love to say it's also going to be 3%, but the way things have been going with healthcare in the recent years, 15 is probably a closer number. Our overall tax rate without the bond and interest levy is 4.99, whereas last year without it, it was 5.29. So obviously going down. And then the capital projects include the roofs that we've talked about, the high school locker room renovation that we're going out for bid for. But payments towards the Morton Academy and early childhood education are budgeted to come from the bond and interest fund. Actually, it's technically the capital projects fund, but regardless, it's factored in a little differently, and I'll show you that a little bit later in the presentation. We're assuming our evidence-based funding will be reliable like it has been, and around the same amount. Each year it's been a little different as far as the tier funding that's increases, but it varies, but it's not a ton. It could be $25,000 to $90,000 depending on where we fall and what kind of money the state has to divvy up to us. The CPI we're utilizing is 5%. The actual was more like 6.5%. But since we're tax capped, we can only use that 5. The EAV is given to us by the Tazewell County Supervisor of Assessments, and they are very, very, very reliable. Not all school districts can say that, or not all counties, I should say, can say that, but ours tends to be very spot on usually. So I feel very confident in the numbers that they always give me. My new property is at 8.2 million compared to 11.4 last year. And so then our total EAV, including new property, is a little over 700 million compared to 652 last year. And that was a 9.5% increase. So our total CPBRT, I'm going to keep it at that 2.78. If you remember, that was my budgeted number for this year. And we got that nice little $500,000 extra notification and what we're anticipating. But I can't bank on that. Again, this is such a big, who knows what's going to happen. But I feel confident with going with the 2.78, so that's where I'm landing with that. This factors in some salary increases, including like minimum wage increases, all the different factors factored in. Again, this is a guesstimate as well because we don't know exactly where that's going to end up. Expenditures in O&M are based on half the completion of the high school locker room project in FY24 and then half next year. So I've kind of factored that in. And then again, just stating that the health insurance costs are budgeted to increase that 15%. The amount of projected increase for the ed fund alone is 1.6 million. And again, even within there, it's primarily salaries and healthcare for those increases. And then the overall tax rate, 4.99 without the issuance of bonds. With the issuance of bonds, we'd be looking at 5.1, which is obviously still lower than last year's, what did I say that was? 5.29. 2.9, that was without the bond and interest levy. So it was like 5.4 something, I believe, just so you know. This is just a picture of what our new property has looked like over the last 10 years. Obviously much higher back in 2013 to 16. Then we had some drops from 17 to 21. And then last year and this year, still sizable increases or reasonable increases. And then this is our EAV over the years.
Trend.
Definitely a good trend. And then this is our ed fund expenditures that I am budgeting. Again, this can change. This is just the first time you see these numbers, but hopefully I'm fairly close on all of this. You know, looking at the salary increases are thrown in there, that increase in healthcare, 7.5% in the other benefits, and then all other expenses with a 3% increase. As you can look down and compare like the budget in '24 for purchased services versus the estimated levy for '25, it's only a $28,000 increase. It's a very small number for those other areas, but definitely something that I think that we can stick within. This one is the building fund expenditures. That $4.8 million in the capital includes some of the high school phase 1 expenditures in FY25 that I mentioned. But again, it does not include the Morton Academy or early childhood expenditures or construction that we've talked about. That's factored in another place. It hasn't been decided, but I have put it in there as a placeholder just in case that is the direction that we go. That does not affect our levy though, or change things for our levy. And then this is the one big picture of everything kind of put together. And like I mentioned earlier, a couple of you have seen this spreadsheet. And when you click into my cells, lots of factoring goes on in this spreadsheet. But a few things to point out to you. The EAV current year new growth increase is 1.167. And then the EAV current year over previous year increase is the 9.48 or 9.5% that I mentioned earlier. As you can see, the overall rate technically is 4.9883. I put 4.99 on the other page, but that's actually what it ends up as. The bottom portion is what I present or provide to request what our levy actually will look like. Those numbers aren't always exact because I typically balloon them a little bit as I am suggested, or that is suggested that we do, so that we don't lose any of the EAV that might not have been captured by Tazewell County when they gave us their estimates. So it's just rounding that's involved whenever I do turn it in, just so you know. And then this is the actual FY25 proposed tentative budget. Keep in mind that the negative amount in the ed fund shown there, that 1.8 million, that is due to me moving the CPPRT money from ed fund to the O&M, as well as the movement of the interest income from, oh no.
I missed the city, sorry, I'll go back.
Do I have to exit out?
I have to reconnect it. Get a lot of slides left. Feel much.
What do I have to do?
2 pages away.
You have it in our board folders. If you'd like to look at it there.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. So as I was saying, that 1.8 is due to the movement of CPPRT to O&M from the ed fund, as well as the interest income that we talked about at the last time I presented to you. Again, that can always change too. If we get more CPPRT, maybe we won't have to take the amount that is typically allotted to the ed fund, and it can stay there and we can put the remaining amount or the additional amount in the O&M. Multiple things can happen. Another thing that could happen is, depending on the project and the timing of payments and how that all works out, perhaps part of it can go into FY26, you know, so there's lots of movement here that is unknown at this time. But then if you notice the capital projects fund, which is not something you normally see on this page. I don't normally have that because it's typically zero, or I have been for a few years now. I have factored in, if we do the issuance of bonds, what that might potentially look like for FY25. And as you can see, all of the days in reserves are still at a healthy amount. So we're still above that 180 that is required. This is the page that everybody seems to like. Those top two lines, that red and the green, that's our revenue and our expenditures. So of course it makes sense that our revenue expenditures tend to be very similar. There's a couple years that we had a lot of revenue and not as much expenditures because that was that extra CPPRT money that we had coming in and we didn't expect it and we didn't have plans for it. But then now we're spending a little bit of that money for the projects that we've been doing. So that's kind of why the red is higher than that green. The blue line is the reserves. So yeah, as you can see, as our revenue went up, so did our reserves. Obviously, it's gonna follow along in suit with that. And then the orange line is the levy itself. And then the purple one is the salaries.
How much longer the minimum wage will we be dealing with that? Is that a couple more years?
FY25, yeah. So January of 2025 is the last official increase for that. Any questions?
Can you back up a couple slides to the spreadsheet of all numbers?
This one or
One more.
this one?
So the 5.87%, you want to explain that? What does that mean? I mean, I know what it is.
So that is the increase from without the bond and interest levy. That is the increase from last year to this year and what that percentage increase is.
And that's over 5, so we can only levy 5% more than we levied last year, but that's above 5% because of new growth.
New property.
So the actual levy difference is 5.87, almost 6%, but we're capped at 5% of last year's levy as an increase, even though the actual CPI is 6.5%. So inflation, and you can judge for yourself what actual inflation is versus what the CPI is calculated to be.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make that point that in a PTEL county, we're a PTEL district, that we're limited in that way regardless of what happens with inflation. We're limited by 5%, but that number is above 5% and that's explained by new growth.
Correct, yes, yes. And keeping in mind that when or if CPI ends up at 0, that's 0 growth for the district if that day comes. That it hasn't been that low since I started here. I think the lowest I've seen was 1.8, I think. But I did see in past years, because of course I go back and I look at all the older years, and I think 0.2 I think I saw at one point, and then one of the years a negative, I believe. So obviously it's not always like this.
Any questions?
I can't help myself, so even though the rate's going down, if your assessed value is going up more than the rate went down, the taxes will increase, so just.
Your rate is lower, but your amount could be higher, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other questions? So next steps, approval of the levy?
Yes, so in November, I'll ask you for the approval of this, and then in December, it will be the hearing and the final levy approval. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. All right, next up we have some policy discussion. As we said at our last meeting, there was a lot to digest in terms of policies, and I'm trying to boil this down as well as we can. So we had employee use of district email, and we had some conversation about that. I just want to kind of give you an update of where that's at. So right now, we are looking at new handbook language. I think I shared one iteration of that with you, but that's even been edited since you've seen it. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about new handbook language with our administrative team and kind of getting their input in this as well. and then I'll bring it back to you and say, this is what we're planning to put in the employee handbook. And, you know, the gist of it is to encourage our employees to use private email addresses for things that are majorly private issues, and a few other considerations that we're gonna put in there. I don't know that we really necessarily need to have a policy change on that, but you might, as a board, might decide, no, we want something in our policy. So we'll start with handbook language, and then we'll go from there, and if you want something stronger, we can certainly entertain that as well. So, still hanging out there with that, we'll get you a draft as soon as we kind of have our administrative team look at it as well. Any other comments about that before we move on to a different topic?
I did like the draft,
Okay,
the start of it anyway.
okay,
I think that'll help in a lot of areas.
all right.
I liked the emphasis on improving our staff's understanding of their roles as public servants and not really trying in any way to limit their expression or freedom, but to educate them further on what we as a board talked about, what we expect those accounts to be used for, and then the education on just it's not a private email account. I just think was really well worded.
And we want to emphasize the fact that, you know, if they're using their district email account, there could be things that could be divulged that are private, that they don't want divulged. We also have language that we really haven't talked about much at this table, that we want them to use their district email accounts for district business. We don't want teachers using private email accounts to talk with parents or students, and that's not a good situation when there's a system in place where we can't account for what was said or can't look it up. So we really want to encourage our teachers and staff to also use the account for school business and not use a private account for school business. So that was part of the emphasis in that language as well.
That
But
reminds me,
I'm sorry, go
pardon
ahead.
me. That reminds me of when the legislation was updated to really include some of teachers' communication and really things that I think just make the relationship with students more casual. It increases a lot more liability for our teachers. And so as we look at this email policy, you know, we want teachers in their email during the day. And I know my children really appreciate when they get an email back from their teacher in the evening. And that may be something our community may have to deal with if our teachers start separating out a lot of their just routine emails from their school email accounts. Our students and parents just may not get that turnaround time. So just trying to think about both sides of this as we're looking at a policy change. What are our intended consequences and our unintended consequences?
Right. That's a great point. That's a great point. And some of our employees may need to figure out how can you toggle back and forth between two accounts in our system. Because if you need to check on a doctor appointment at lunchtime, you know, is it easy to toggle back and forth in the Google system that we have? So that might be some training that we need to look at on how to do that, so.
Yeah, maybe our leadership team or principals can give us feedback on if, you know, how we can help staff. You guys do a great job with that.
Thank you. Any other points you want to make about that? Okay, moving on to bullying and harassment. I think last time we spoke, we weren't necessarily looking for a change in policy. That's very well laid out in a lot of different policies about discrimination, bullying, harassment, and the lack of tolerance on that, and the process and the timelines. There's actually new legislation that we have in policy to reflect that. But what I think I did say at that time was, I'll ask our administrative team how it's going. Even though this isn't data with numbers, what does it look like out there recently? So I asked them a few questions in the last leadership team meeting, and I said, you know, how does it look like there's a surge? Is it more than it's ever been? Are we seeing a spike in it? And they said, we're not seeing a surge over these last few years. It's been very consistent. It's always been in schools. It still is. And then I started asking questions about what kind of things are we seeing? And one of the points that administrator made, or several made, was that a lot of times what's being called bullying isn't actually bullying. It might be harassment or name calling or disagreements or complaints or different, but bullying really has three main components to it. There's a power component to it where one kid has power over another. Maybe he's older, maybe he's bigger, maybe he's more threatening, maybe there's some authority aspect to it, that there's a certain purpose behind it. I want something out of this. I want to make you submit in some way, and that there's a pattern, that it's a repeated situation. So that's really how we're looking at bullying. So a lot of things that people might be calling bullying, we don't necessarily define that as bullying. But that doesn't mean it's right. We still address it. It's harassment, it's mistreatment or disrespect. But that was one point that was made clear in that conversation. They said a lot of it involves name calling, point blank. A lot of name calling back and forth, which we've seen in kids. I mean, one of our goals is to teach kids how to respect one another. So this is part of that process, unfortunately, where there's discipline involved and discussions and trying to curb that and grow our kids to a level of maturity where they don't do that anymore. But we've got kids of all ages. So, schools have always had that, and we're gonna continue to have that and address it as it happens. They indicated, investigating these things sometimes is very tricky because, believe it or not, kids are not always honest about what they've said or done. So that's always so we have a complaint, an allegation, but then you have no corroboration or witnesses, and so there's a lot of frustration that can be involved in that. That doesn't mean you don't address it. It just means that there isn't always consequences. You can't always get to the bottom of it. They said complaints often involve friends, or the harassment is actually mutual. It's a back and forth, but then one kid says, well, I'm gonna complain about it, but there's been mutual things going back and forth between two students. So that was one thing they mentioned. And in all that, we tried to solidify, as we concluded that conversation, solidified that, what's important is that we're always acting on this. We're always taking the complaints, we're always looking for it, we're trying our best to get to the bottom of it, we're doing it on the timeline that's required, and we're doing the communications that we're required to do with parents on both sides of the issue. So that both sides know within 24 hours about the complaint, how it's being addressed, and that it's being investigated. So bottom line, maybe it's not worse than ever. Maybe it is a lot of these things that isn't exactly bullying. Regardless of what it is, our job is to address it as quickly as possible and to communicate with parents as quickly as possible. So just wanted to share that with you. There was a lot longer conversation. I kind of boiled it down, but those were some of the points that were made. Yeah.
Do we have good coverage on the playgrounds when kids are out there?
No. Not in terms of so if you go to a playground right now, if you were to walk over to Grundy during lunchtime, you're gonna see 3 or 4 monitors, but you're gonna see kids everywhere on the playground. So is there an adult that's within earshot of all those kids? No way. That's probably never gonna happen.
Here or anywhere?
Oh, anywhere, yeah, for sure. So that's not just Morton. We probably have more coverage, more supervision than other schools, actually. But to cover that kind of territory, that kind of acreage, with kids all over and what they're saying, and yeah, you're never gonna do that. So, but kids also need to learn to play together and work together, and we'll deal with the fall, and they always do. Every recess, there's a couple different concerns that happen, and they address that. And that's really part of the learning process with kids, is having that opportunity to have unstructured play, have concerns with one another, and then, as needed, have an adult address them. That's actually, to me, a very healthy process. So that's what we do. So that's a little bit. I just want to kind of catch you up to that conversation. I'm not recommending any changes to policy, but if you think of any, certainly we will entertain those.
I have a question. To the audience remark, is there a different process for a student to report bullying, harassment for a fellow student versus for a faculty, staff, bus driver, more of an adult? How are those complaints handled?
That's a good question. So all complaints should be handled one of 2 ways. We have a hotline form, which maybe not too many people know about or access. It's really maybe not the best way, really, but if someone wants to be maybe they're at home and they don't have access to a trusted adult, that might be an avenue for them. We just at least wanted to provide an online avenue. That's not what mostly gets used. Mostly it's a student going to a trusted adult. That could be a teacher, it could be the principal or another administrator. And that's what we would do for any case of harassment, whether it's another faculty member or a student. We would want a student to start with a trusted adult to report it, and then that trusted adult would take it from there into the proper channels. So really, I think the process is the same, and it's for students to feel comfortable to trust an adult with that information and make sure they do that right away. Or a parent sometimes will be the one that reports that. Okay?
And then I just had a quick comment, if you'll forbear with me, just because I think it echoes our board sentiments from the last meeting's discussion. There was an now outdated example in medicine where surgeons would say, well, if I haven't taken out, so many normal appendixes this year, that means that I'm not taking out enough appendixes. And the point was that missing an appendicitis would be fatal. And so as we look at our bullying system and the number of complaints we're getting, I would rather us have more complaints where, as you described, well-trained faculty and staff members evaluate the situation and downgrade it to not fatal than us not having the actual cases reported. So I think it is really important that even if one student a year used our website bullying button, that button I think should still be there, because as many avenues as we can provide for our students to find safe, supportive people, we want to do. And our goal is not necessarily to reduce the number of people concerned, but rather to find that maybe it's not as serious. So we are finding the serious one. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't say that more efficiently, but.
Well put. Yeah, we definitely prefer over-reporting to under-reporting.
Or you could have just said that, Diane, yes.
I like the way you said it.
You're not limited to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you for that. A couple other, so the next two things are a little more in depth, but I'll try to expedite those conversations. So it's use of buildings is another one. How do we use our buildings? Who do we let use our buildings? One of our board members had an email today asking, how are our buildings used? Who comes to our buildings and uses them now that aren't school related? And so I did kind of a cursory thought and asked also Carol Lou, who's in charge of processing this. I said, have I forgotten anyone in this list? So PTOs obviously use our buildings. The Scouts, Boys and Girls Scouts use our buildings. Park District and their affiliates like HEAT and different soccer organizations associated with the Park District use our buildings for free. We also use their facilities for free. So the softball field, the baseball field, soccer field, and cross country. There's a lot of things we use the Park District for. So we have a mutual agreement with the Park District on their using our facilities for free, just as we use theirs. We have non-Park District sports, like there's a soccer group that's not affiliated with the Park District. They use our facilities, they rent that though. Parents rent our facilities for birthday parties, especially mostly at the elementary school, not necessarily high school or junior high. The Tri-County Tennis Tournament was hosted at our tennis courts. Morton Fine Arts Association uses Bertha Frank Performing Arts Center, and that center also gets rented for many different purposes. I didn't even begin to try to track on everyone that uses that. Dance studios have used our facilities. We've had adults rent the gyms for basketball in the morning. We've had that. We have not had a church rent our facilities in a long time, but we did for several years, going way back. And of course, we would have to do that on neutral criteria. You don't tell a church no, but tell another business yes. It's a completely neutral decision. So churches can use our facilities. but we've not really had any other adult groups that I can think of that have rented our facilities, like some organization, a political organization, or anything like that, that's come to my mind. Our fire department and police have used our facilities pretty extensively this summer, with fire department using Lincoln School for drilling for their purposes while our students are not there. So that was in the summer. Our police have used our schools for active shooter training. Again, not when students are in the building. So we've let those organizations use our buildings. So, you know, whatever, I mean, I think that our policies for public use of our buildings are where we want them. The alternative is pretty draconian. It would be nobody gets to use it but us. And I don't think that's how we want to live with our communities supporting and paying for the schools. And, you know, we're a taxpayer paid organization. We just looked at the levy, right? We know how many millions of dollars taxpayers put into our school district. So I feel like we're in a good spot with that, and we allow, you know, the question mark is who gets to do it for free and who doesn't, and those are sometimes tricky things. Governmental agencies that we have, you know, agreements with, like the Park District, I feel like that's solid. That's a solid rule for us. We use their facilities, they use ours. We don't charge them, they don't charge us. So other than that, I feel like we're in the right spot here. We open our buildings to just about anyone. We do charge rent for those that are using it for their private purposes. So I don't think we want to stop that from happening. So, and we don't really have problems. Once in a while, something will get broken. You know, we've got cameras. We often identify, hey, this happened. The organization pays for it. We really have very minimal issues with as much as our buildings get used. Any comments about the use of our buildings?
Are we in compliance with the law governing access to our buildings?
Yes, yes. Again, we could decide to close it all down. I wouldn't want to even begin to do that. The law also addresses what students can do. Students can have their own groups, and they, by law, at the secondary level, so like high school level, they can have their own non-school sponsored groups. They by law, it's called the Equal Access Act. By law, they can use our buildings, our classrooms. They can have meetings in our classrooms, and they do. We have a diversity club at the high school. We have a Fellowship of Christian Athletes club at the high school. Those are not school-sponsored clubs. We have a faculty person there to supervise them, but they are not part of the club. They're not supposed to be leading any part of the club. They're there just to make sure, okay, everything's in the room. It's left the way it began. No one's, you know, there's just for student supervision. So that again is done on a completely neutral basis, and so students are allowed to use the school facilities for student-led clubs. So that's in compliance with the law also. And we do not charge them rent, by the way, for that. So the next topic, and the last topic in this series, maybe is the most complicated one, is the dissemination of materials. How do we allow people to disseminate information that's not school related? And that is a complicated process. We've made decisions, and these decisions are apt to change. If you wanted to change them, we could move forward to change them. But I'll try to be as concise as I can on this. So if you read through some of the forms and the things that people have to go through to get things distributed, you probably started to get a sense of how we do this. We reserve our district email, our websites, and our electronic signs almost entirely strictly for school-sponsored things. So that would be things that are actually related to the school, like PTO is an affiliate of the school, but other groups that might meet aren't. Karate club wouldn't be. We don't have a karate club. If students formed one and they wanted to meet and do something, we wouldn't put it on our marquee, we wouldn't put it in our district email or on our website. So that's kind of the line we've drawn up to this point. So what about the other places? Like what about school announcements and those kind of things? That's when it gets more of a gray area. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'll say a few things and I'll let you ask questions. But So we do allow some, so in terms of the district email, websites, and electronic signs, you might see some things that aren't exactly school related, but they're community related or governmental related. For example, you might see something about Pumpkin Fest, like I think literally in, I think during the Pumpkin Festival, we had something on our Lincoln marquee that was the pickup location for the bicycle ride that the Pumpkin Festival, I don't remember what it was called, but because that was a chamber-oriented thing for our community, we put it on a marquee to help people guide them to where they're supposed to be. So there are those governmental sort of things like library, the chamber, the village, the park district, where we might utilize those systems to advertise something that they're doing in association with us. But commercially, we're not going to allow any kind of commercial-oriented things there. You probably noticed that we have 2 levels of approval for distribution of things. One is general distribution. Basically, they give them to us and we pass them out to their target audience. It could be on paper, it could be electronic. There's an electronic backpack on our website that we can just put things right in and parents can access them electronically. A lot of it is done by paper. So general distribution is actually distributing the information to the target students or staff by handing it out and getting it to those people. The next level, sometimes we won't approve that. And the next level is that we will post and provide it. So that means we'll advertise that it exists, but we're not going to hand it out to everybody. And people who are interested would need to go pick it up at the location that it's at, usually the main office. So we would allow a poster to go up. Hey, if you're interested in this, go pick up more information. We would advertise that on our announcements. So like to kids, we'd say, hey, you can, if you're interested in this thing, you can go pick up information about it. This gets to be sometimes a gray area. We look at what is the audience? Is the audience discerning adults or are they impressionable children? So that's one of the things we kind of look at. The other thing is this simply a commercial or is this of some kind of actual benefit to kids? And I'll give you a couple examples. One that always comes up every year, Bradley Camps. So Bradley University is going to host a softball camp. Now that's a profit organization, right? Bradley University, and they're going to try to make money off of kids to do a softball camp. But our kids might want to go to a softball camp, right? So that might be the kind of thing we'd say, okay, that's kind of a commercial entity, but our kids could get some benefit. We wouldn't distribute it, but we would post it, and then we'd provide it for whoever's interested. That's the kind of call we would make on that. And these get grayer than this. That might be obvious to you, but they get grayer like, well, when there was family video, when there used to be video, remember when we used to rent videos? I don't know if you remember that. They used to do a thing where if you get an A on your report card, you get a free video rental. And so you could go in and show your report card, you got 3 A's, you got 3 free rentals. That's a total commercial, right? But yet our kids get a benefit from it, and they get to brag about their report card. So that would be one of those cases where like, you might mull that over a while. Like, is the benefit equal to the commercial? And those are the kind of decisions that Joe gets to make now. I made those decisions for 15 years. So there's these gray areas in some of these things. And, to say that we always make the exact right call, sometimes it's a judgment call. So the family video thing, we would say, yeah, we'll let you put a poster up. And if people are interested, they can get more information about it. Or the poster itself might tell you the whole story. Like, you go there and get that. So, I know that's a lot of me talking. I thought I'd give you maybe some time to ask some questions or maybe give you some scenarios and maybe you had a chance to look at the forms and if you have questions about what they say and how we kind of deliberate all of that, I'd be happy to talk more about that.
That ain't broke, don't
You
fix
wore
it.
us out.
Good. That's my goal. And
I don't think it's broke.
My comment last meeting was that the importance of these being implemented is much more important than changing the policies. And the implementation, just making the staff and the admin realize that whether it's the posting and the hand distribution materials, think it through. It's easy to be nice and say yes, but that may not be the right answer. And bullying, yes, everything is serious, it needs to be looked at, proven till it's not. And at this point, if anybody still wants to use their personal email for personal use after this, they need it. It needs more than a policy to tell them not to, because this should be clear evidence that it's just better not to. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Other thoughts? And these get by the goalie. There are times things get distributed, they weren't supposed to get distributed, so there's humans in the system. And errors do happen on this. I just want you to know that happens. We correct them when we see them.
Do we still periodically review the rent charges, particularly Bertha Frank?
Yes. That's something we review on a regular basis. Ms. Kowalski's involved in that process, considering, what does it cost to heat that place and have a custodian there, and what's other places renting for, and so we do a review of that. Probably not every year.
We used to hear about it, and
Okay.
I just haven't for a while, so.
Okay.
Not that we need to, but
All right.
that was the only reason I asked the question.
Last year we
Last year we reviewed it, yeah, okay.
And mistakes do happen. People are people, and they're gonna make poor choices, and as long as those mistakes are, accounted for, and I don't think that we need to publicly say what we do, as long as they're accounted for.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're keeping all of those policies and practices as they are. Okay. All right. Thank you for that long discussion. Appreciate you looking at all the materials as well. All right, next up, we have teacher evaluation changes and extra duty position changes. So Dr. Sander, you're up.
Okay, so the evaluation committee met on October 10th, and we looked at an agenda that had basically 3 different categories of discussion items. The first one was law changes. Really kind of ties our hands to it, but the information that I brought was in August, the governor signed into public law changes that were made in regards to tenure. So tenure used to be 4 years to make tenure. You could get accelerated tenure if you had 3 consecutive excellence. And then there was this thing called portable tenure, which didn't get used very often. That law has changed, so now new employees to a district can make tenure in 3 years. Accelerated tenure goes down to 2 years. And the portable tenure, and I just went to a legal seminar on this, the language for the portable tenure is a moot point. And so it's convoluted. It would require you to bring your last evaluation from your previous district. You had to have been tenured in your previous district. Bring that excellent evaluation. Well, if you're an excellent teacher in your previous district, most likely you're going to be excellent, okay? And the law says you can make tenure in 2 years if you're excellent. So the whole portable tenure is just kind of a moot point. And so that's what the legal said. They're like, we don't have any rationale for that. So that was one of the big rule changes. The second rule change was, it's kind of a minor, it's the date at which the deadline for issuing probationary teachers non-renewal notices. And it used to say 45 days before the end of the school term. But every district was different. And so they actually picked tax day, April 15th, as the hard deadline. So that's uniform across. Those notices, non-renewal notices, would have to be received by the person by April 15th. The third law change was in your final year, if a teacher is in their final year, they can request to have and they're being evaluated in their final year, they can request to have it waived. And basically what the waiver is that they would just choose to use their previous evaluation as their official evaluation score for their last year. And so those were the 3 law changes that have taken place. The admin team last May was looking at kind of our evaluation process. And so we discussed at the leadership team the pre and post observation questions. And so one of the meetings, we sat there and went through all the questions, both pre, post. I think there's about 8 questions for each. And we really condensed those down. We made them more applicable to what our initiatives are now, like standards-based classrooms and that. So some of the questions were just general, and we're trying to be more specific with that. And so we brought that to the committee. We had really good conversation, and so the committee agreed to go ahead and move forward with those changes. That will take place next school year. And I should have said all of the law changes, they're in effect right now for the 23-24 school year. The pre and post observation questions will go into effect next school year. And then the last item is just a running agenda item that we do every year. We have to annually approve our para joint agreement. So when the para law came into effect, they wrote in there that you have to have a system to determine which grouping your teachers are in. There's 4 groups. And that is used for the honorable dismissal list in the event that we would go through a RIF. And so group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. As you go up in groups, that's the most secure position. And so they gave districts the ability to adopt what the state had recommended or come up with some, if you had certain caveats, for group 3, placing, into a different group, that committee could do that. So the 2 years I've been here, the committee looks at it and goes, yep, we're not going to make any changes. So I think that's just a continual process on that. So that is the summary of the evaluation committee. This is the discussion on that. The next step in that process is we'd like to bring that back to the board at the next meeting as a official action item, so that we can move forward and get these changes put into place. So what questions do you have?
So these are just reflecting the law changes. This is a part of the negotiations process, so we are negotiating with the teachers through this process. Not that there's a lot of things that we can decide to do or not do, but it does require the board's approval because this is a negotiation process. The administrative team is doing that on behalf of the board through this evaluation process. Just want to explain the formality of that and why it requires the board's approval.
Positive, April 15th is nice, just because it never moves, it's
Right.
April 15th.
That's a good point.
It is.
Any idea why the law felt that the last year's evaluation could be waived? Or is there a benefit in retirement, or do those evaluations follow you?
It really doesn't follow you. Once you're retired, you're retired. I just think it's more of a convenience thing in the entire process. The amount of time to do evaluations, if you have someone, and this is just Joe's subjective opinion on this, you've got someone that has worked 35 years. Hopefully they've been excellent in their last, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe longer. I think it's just one of those, hey, we're gonna write this on in there and they can choose to waive it. It'll be interesting to see if anyone doesn't waive it, but anyway.
The legislators heard the outcry about the time intensity to this, and if you recall, we made a change in the evaluation plan where it used to be every other year teachers were evaluated, now it's every 3 years. That's a result of that outcry of the time and effort that goes into this process. And this is just one more way of cutting a little more time out of it, because why are you evaluating a retiring teacher? What are you trying to do to improve when, that's a March thing and their time with us is about over, so, yeah. Okay, so the next board meeting will have the approval of that as an action item. And what about extra duty positions?
Okay, with the extra duty positions, the committee met on October 3rd. And we looked at two different groupings. First grouping I'm going to talk about is all things that were academic related. And so there were two proposals that came on the academic side of the house. And the first one you're all familiar with is the Skills USA. I would say that is a good practice on how to bring a new activity on board. So Mr. McFarland, Mrs. Beard have done this. They're going into their third year. So they really haven't been compensated for their previous work. When an idea comes on up, it's always a good opportunity to see, hey, is this going to catch on? Are the students going to buy into it? I think that they've checked those boxes. And so some of the information I put in here on this, year one, they had 18 students. Year two jumped to 59. They're expecting about 77. Last week, they were in the middle of getting students registered for Skills USA. Let's go back to last year. There was 19 students that competed at state. 2 qualified for the national competition. We're one of 3 schools that were recognized as a chapter of excellence program. And so that's all attributed to the work that Mr. McFarland and Ms. Beard and the high school staff. Jamie Adolphson, she is the administrator that oversees the careers and technical education. That's what the Skills USA is. It is absolutely phenomenal. I'd hate to quantify and say that could be one of the most exciting high school events when you see that many kids from the state competing in so many different areas. It is just absolutely exciting to see the amount of work that goes into that. And it's all the trades. It's police, it's EMTs, it's hairstyling. It's just absolutely phenomenal to see.
Drone flying.
Drones
was one of the most interesting things. I don't know if anybody got a chance to see that or see video of it. A net cage about half the size of this room where kids are flying drones and trying to get them to land and pick up things and different obstacles and competing with other schools on that. It's incredible.
Yeah. So that was a recommendation that came from the committee. It's new, so we didn't have any current thing to go off of, and so when we looked at the amount of hours, and I don't know how quick I can put my hands on it, they're both putting in hundreds of hours, and it really is a year-long activity. And so the committee had great discussion on that. They looked at a placement in category H of our extra duty. So category H is the 13 to 20%. And so that's anywhere between $5,000 to $8,200. We would naturally, if this is approved by the board, give them the credit for year 1, year 2, so they'd be coming in as a year 3 and get placed in that range. So I can go on to the next one and then I can pause and we can take questions about the academic side. So if that's okay. The next one was the junior high special education position. That is currently in the contract as a category B, which is a 3 to 6%. And the title for that that's the special education team lead. So the junior high has team lead positions, and it's for the 4 different teams. And I think there's PE and the red team, gray team, green team, white, PE, special ed, and encore. So those are all the team leaders. If you look at where special ed was when that was probably initiated in the contract, special ed fit exactly what everyone else was doing. Since then, the duties and responsibilities associated with our special ed person has grown, and I would say exponentially. They are responsible for doing a lot of planning, managing caseloads, IEPs, and so the junior high staff grabbed the high school special ed department chair and compared the duties and responsibilities with what they're doing. Now, the the junior high is really kind of the pivot person. They've got, 4 to 5, schools that they have to reach down to with sixth graders and sit in on all of those meetings and get the information, take it for 2 years, and then hand it off to the high school. And so the committee did have really good conversation and discussion on this one. There is also a junior high department head position. But when we looked at the duties and responsibilities, they almost reflect what the high school special ed department chair or coordinator is getting paid. And so that was the recommendation, is moving that from a category B from a 3 to 6% to an 8 to 13%. And that's one that just is, it's an evolution over time, additional duties, responsibilities with our special ed staff. Do you have any questions on the academic side on those recommendations? Okay. Oh man, the next one, I almost need a visual board, because last year we added competitive, oh man, I think it's competitive, last year was competitive dance. This year we're adding competitive cheer to the mix. And so what we were looking at here is on the athletic side, there's 6 categories here.
Can I just give you a little bit of something before you?
Yes.
So when we went through our Title IX issue, part of that was to survey students about their interests and to increase female athletics, if at all possible, if there was an interest in it. In that survey, there was a high degree of interest for competitive dance and an apparent interest in competitive cheerleading, although when it came to it, there wasn't an interest there. Maybe I think people said, I'm interested, but didn't follow through when they had a meeting. Well, now the sentiment has changed, and that's what's led to competitive cheer. So that was an original part of our survey, our Title IX survey, that we were reaching out to kids and asking this question, particularly females. And while we're now reacting to that because the interest has changed. They said there was an interest, but there wasn't. Now there is an interest. Is that a fair way to say it?
It is.
Okay, I just want to give you that history.
So there was varsity dance fall, and the way we do set up our dance and our cheer is that we have basically, you have the opportunity to be in 2 different teams, the fall and then the winter. And so we do have varsity dance that performs at football games. And so we're looking at a change between 4 and 6% for the fall varsity dance and 2 to 4% for the JV dance for the fall. Then we've got 4 categories of cheerleading that was also discussed. And keeping in mind that cheerleading is building on the competitive cheer that they're going to move and participate in the competitive cheer series. The competitive cheer is extra events that take place on weekends. So they're doing, not only are they doing basketball games, home and away, but they're also going to be going to competitions. And those competitions aren't always just right around, central Illinois. Sometimes they're up in the northern suburbs. Sometimes they're down in St. Louis. And so just with the addition, we're looking at, the proposal was to move varsity fall cheer from 6% to 8%, the JV from 4 to 6%, and then the winter cheer, there's a bigger increase because of the additional competitions that will take place during that winter season. And so the proposal is to go from 8% to 12% and then 5.5% to 10%. Okay, all that being said, the changes for the athletics, because they're flat percentages, they're not in a range, would go from $12,000 to about $18,000. So you're looking at about $6,500 increase for those activities. And so that was on the athletic side. Now that will match up closely to what the changes that we adopted, the board approved last year. The biggest discrepancy between cheer and dance, if anyone's asking, well, why is, varsity cheer get 12%, the dance is not as much? Because the dance team just performs at home games only, okay? And they typically do a sideline and they do their halftime routine. Cheer is, they're going on the road with the athletic teams. And so their number of events is significantly more throughout that time period. So that's what the committee is bringing forward. And as Dr. Smog said, this is the time to ask questions. If you need more time to look at this and you have additional questions that come on up, please forward those questions on over to me. I'll try to get you the answers as fast as I can, but between the two, we're looking at close to about $20,000 of what I would say is new money. I would say 10,000 of those dollars, or almost 11,000, is for a brand new program. So, questions?
So the percentage is applied to a base salary, is that correct? It's
Yes.
not their salary.
Right. We maintain an extra duty base separate from what our entry-level teachers make.
They saw $41,049.
I think that's it.
What?
I think that sounds right.
I was looking at it. Plain squirrel.
I have a question on the competitive and the just regular cheer, let's say, or even with dance and competitive. But I support this, but I just have a question. What's the expectation to these coaches when those things kind of tend to overlap? I feel like with dance last year, if I remember right, there were times where maybe they had like a dance competition on a Saturday, and so they didn't perform on Friday at the game. So like where we're saying we're paying them for both, is that the expectation that they're at all?
That's a good question. It's a scheduling thing, and so we gotta have an awareness of that.
Right.
And then make that kind of determination, if you can avoid it, that would be great. I'm gonna have to get with Mr. Jones and kind of look at the forecast with that. With the competitive, both dance and cheer, the amount of practice time that is required to get prepared for the competitions, that goes up significantly.
Right. Yeah, no, I know
It's
about that.
way different than just your normal sideline and doing your cheers and stunts,
Right.
during a basketball game.
No, I totally understand that. I hope that in the end, it doesn't take away from them showing up at the stadiums and being a part of that. And even if it's not even if it's not at the same time, but just saying like, hey, we're doing this weekend instead of this.
Sure.
If an event happens on a Friday and a Saturday, are they going to be at both, or is it we're gonna go to one or the other? Does that make sense?
It does, and
I don't wanna put the expectation too high, but what's been communicated, I guess?
That is a really good question. And I'd be an advocate. It's an exciting time for our students and our community members when they're at a basketball
Right.
game, and you have the pep band that's playing, and you've got the cheer and the dance that are doing their things. It is definitely something that is missing when one of those components is not there.
I totally agree.
But it might be a cost of doing this, in that, like you said, there might be conflicts.
Right.
And the, cheerleading has changed over the years. It used to be very much the mission of a supportive group for the team, and now they're their own team.
Right.
So there is that kind of a transition they're into their own competitions now, and there might be some cost to that, but we're gonna try to minimize that for the reasons
Yeah.
Dr. Sander just said. It's a great environment that they help create, so.
We always add.
Yeah.
Do we review to see if any of the extra duties are outdated themselves?
You know what, that is another really good question. I know Mr. Whelan and I have talked about, when you memorialize something in a contract, being able to be flexible. If there's something that doesn't get filled, then it doesn't get filled. We're not, we're not paying for something like that. And as things change, like the Skills USA, 3 years ago, that hadn't even been on the radar screen. And then you have something that comes on like that. And then you sometimes wonder, if your student body stays the same, as something else ramps up, is there going to be less interest in one of the other things? And so we did talk about that as far as like possibly linking, instead of putting all of the different activities, because there's about 3 pages of the different groups that are listed there. Is there a better way to kind of capture that and make that more of a flexible document? And so I think.
Yeah, just to your point, I'm just saying if there's a limited number of students and they can only be in so many places and we keep adding things, or there are other places that we don't need the help.
Okay.
You still want to support the kids, but you also, we have a budget.
Exactly.
Just out of curiosity, why is there a fall and winter for Morton and Dunlap, but the rest of the schools just have a?
I think it's whatever the schools have always done. I talked to Mr. Jones about that. I think one of the nice things about having 2 is it provides flexibility. The other schools that have just a cheerleading squad, that's their cheerleading squad. They cheer at home football games, and then they go and then they cheer at the basketball. Well, that's a long season, and I think maybe having the flexibility to have both maybe allow someone to participate in a sport instead of if you've got someone that's going to go that would love to cheer for football but they're a basketball player, or cheer for basketball but they're a volleyball player, they're going to have to make a choice. And so I'm kind of on the fence on that one. I really see the value of having both. It sure is easier from a budget standpoint when you just have one, because that's what you have. But then also you're kind of limiting your pool. You only have one, so I can kind of see both sides.
I like that explanation. If it gives a girl a chance to cheer at one time and then still participate in a sport, I like it.
Yep.
Not all school districts add positions in the middle of a contract. We're in a 3-year contract. It's been our practice to add things that the administration felt was needed. Like Skills USA is a perfect example, so is competitive cheer. So I just want the board to know that we enter into this agreeing that these are needs, and then we go through the process of trying to determine the compensation based on what other jobs there are and how they pay and the responsibilities and time commitment, and try to do the best we can, and not just taking whatever a teacher might be requesting, but to really do that evaluation. So that's gone into this. And I want to also note that, as we enter in negotiations in the spring, we're going to bring these numbers to the table. What have we added since the last contract? How much money is that? And we're going to, there's a reasonable expectation that should be acknowledged by the teachers, and that this money's been spent, this is what we've added, and that is going to be part of the conversation that we have in the negotiations process. So I think we do it well. I think we add things when we need to add them, and this is for the students' benefit. But we also don't want to forget what we've done in the midst of the beginning of a contract to the end of it. So just want to let you know that we're going to be doing that survey or study and figure out what have we added, what does that cost us since the beginning of this contract. So any other questions on that?
Very time that we feel we're on extra duty.
Hang in there.
We're almost there.
All right, so both those topics will come back to the board at our next meeting for your approval, since we'll be paying people to do those positions. I think that concludes our discussion items.
Okay.
Action items.
Moving on to action items. Valerie, I'll correct your typo. Do I have a motion for the Board of Education to approve Mr. Jerry Rudd as the IASB Assembly Delegate and Andrew Roth as the alternate?
Oh, he took.
He ain't here.
Mr. Breaker. Mr. Breaker.
That's a classic move.
So moved.
That was quick.
Classy, classic.
Does Amy know about this?
What? He's gonna do that, I'm sure.
He's watching at home.
We're fine.
I'll second it then.
Thank you.
Okay, so was that Dr. Cross and Mrs. Lehman?
I think it was Neely, right?
Neely.
All right. Mr. Neely,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Dr. Crawl,
Yes.
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd.
Yes.
We will not ask Mr. Roth.
If you're watching, Andrew.
Yeah, just goes to show you not to miss.
That is fantastic.
Are we having a presentation on this or just?
No, just approve it. There might be something. Ms. Kowalski, do you want to speak to the next action item about issuing bonds?
Yes, so Steve Adams from PMA is here to answer any questions you might have in regards to the issuance of the bonds.
Thank you, Steve, for being here. This has been a long meeting, so appreciate you being here.
No problem.
Any questions for Steve? Steve is
We're authorizing him to go out to receive.
to issue bonds. You want to explain the process?
Yeah, not a problem. I appreciate it. This is your resolution of intent to issue working cash bonds. So this starts the process to get the to go through the approval process for the working cash. Now, what will be done after this is there will be what's known as a Bond Issue Notification Act or BINA hearing, which you open up the floor for any comment, and then. Come, I believe, I'm doing this, trying to do this from memory, in December, there will be a parameters resolution, so it will set high and not to exceed numbers for the actual issuance. And then the plan is in early January to actually issue the bonds. So it's a process to get to where you're up to ready to sell the bonds. And this is just teeing the ball up for that whole process right now.
So this is multiple step approval.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And the issuance says not to exceed 6,000, but that the limit is based on our debt limit.
96
million. 6 million. I say 6,000.
6,000.
6,000 thousands.
Whatever's on the paper. No.
6,000 thousands. So but the actual limit is there's a debt limit.
There is a debt limit. This is nowhere near your debt limit. This is based on the numbers that we've gone over scenarios and looked at, and it says not to exceed. The issuance will probably be somewhere south of there, but when you're talking working cash, especially with approval, you want to build in a cushion, if you will, because it's easier to come back down off that number. If you would have to go higher, you would have to go start the whole process over. So that's why we've put that little cushion in there, just to allow for any changes that might happen between now and January. But the intent is to be south of that $6 million number.
What's our limit to the nearest million?
Yep.
14?
Now, how are you talking limit?
Our cash bond limit.
For working cash?
Yeah.
I apologize, I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can look that up and get that to Lisa.
It was in your presentation last time, I believe.
Yeah, I know, and
That's fine, no worries.
I was a lot of sleeps ago.
We forgot too, so.
Either, because I wasn't trying to go up to that number, I was trying to utilize our funds in the best way I could.
Any other questions? We have a motion to accept the resolution declaring an intent to issue not to exceed 6 million working cash fund bonds and directing that notice of such intent to be published in the manner provided by law. All at once.
So moved. Support.
Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Neely,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd.
That was me. Supported
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. I meant Dr. Cross.
Yes. We look and sound alike, it's fine.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
Dr. Crawl,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lehman.
Yes.
Thank you, Steve, for all of your work. Appreciate it.
Do I have a motion to approve the corrected consent agenda.
I'll move that Board of Education for the consent agenda correcting the date of the minutes approved to the October 3rd.
Support.
Third.
You third, okay.
You thirded it, that's fine.
Thank you.
For the third one.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Dr. Crawl,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Neely,
Yeah.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
and Dr. Cross.
Yes.
With that, do I have a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of negotiations and personnel?
Support.
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Rudd,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
Dr. Crawl,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Neely.
Yes.
Our next meeting is November 14th at 5:30 in the same location. So with that, we'll take 5 minutes to tear down.